Hello and good evening, everyone, and Happy New Year. Welcome to the first live stream, Substance live stream of 2020. So my name is Vincent Gault, and I'm going to pass 1 hour, 1 hour and a half, more or less, with our invitee today, who is Kyle Horwood. Hey, Kyle. Hello and good evening, everyone, and
Happy New Year to you.
Welcome to the first live stream, Substance live stream of 2020. So my name is Vincent Gault, and I'm going to pass 1 hour, 1 hour and a half, more or less, with our invitee today, who is Kyle Horwood. Hey, Kyle.
Hello.
And good evening, everyone, and
Happy New Year to you.
Welcome to the first live stream, Substance live stream of 2020. So my name is Vincent Gault, and I'm going to pass 1 hour, 1 hour and a half, more or less, with our invitee today, who is Kyle Horwood. Hey, Kyle.
Hello.
Sorry about that. I'm just trying to find where the echo comes from. I have a big echo. Kyle, do you have the video as well, maybe?
The Substance, the stream video.
Yeah, I know you lost the audio because I want to avoid the... So this is a bad way to start. I don't know where. Sorry about that. I'm just trying to find where the echo comes from. I have a big echo. Yeah. Boom. Sorry about that. So let's start again. So I'm going to show you a few stuff about Kyle. So Kyle, I'm going to share now a bit about your experience. So could you tell us what you do and who you are, basically? Kyle, did I lose you? This is the worst live stream ever, I think. So we lost Kyle, but he's calling now. Okay, so I got Kyle again.
Hello.
Hey, Kyle. This is the worst start for live stream ever to start the year. So could you share your screen meanwhile?
That's
And believe it or not, we repeated before to do this this live stream. So good resolution of the year. Repeat more. I'm just sharing your ArtStation page. So about your experience. So you have been for a while right now. So tell us a bit about yourself.
Yes, I've been working in the industry for about 4 or 5 years now, and I've worked on a couple of tutoring websites like 3D Motive back in the day, and then from there I moved on to actually working freelance. Where I worked on an indie game called Winter Hall, and then I worked for Insomniac Games for a bit on Spider-Man on the PS4, and then after that I worked on Tom Clancy's Division 2 in Ubisoft Annecy.
Okay, that's cool. Actually, we had the chance to get the Spider-Man team at GDC, and it was super cool. And if I'm not wrong, now you have co-founded a small studio called Cloud Colony Games.
Yes, so now I have a indie studio that I formed with my partner and a friend called Cloud Colony Games. And the studio itself, we're aiming to eventually make narrative experiences and make games that focus on narrative. But right now, because we want to get a name for ourselves and get that portfolio behind us, we're working on a few smaller games that are more like arcade type.
And today we are here to talk what you did for Substance Source. Basically, what we like to do with Substance Source is to invite some key artists like you and give either these artists can come with a theme, or we can propose a theme and they create a collection basically. And you chose the ancient Japan, and you made a few materials, actually 15 materials based on this, which are really awesome. So how did you come with this theme basically?
So I'm a big fan of like medieval, just in general, and fantasy genres, and I really kind of wanted to do something that was based on history, and I did bounce around a couple of different type of ideas, and then we when we were talking back and forth, I think I kind of then came up with the idea of the Japanese medieval one, because I was playing Sakura on PS4, and I thought, this would be quite a cool texture to make. So I gathered my mood board together, and then that's when I kind of pitched it to you guys, and you were like, gave me the go ahead, and yeah, that was pretty much where it came from, as well as the ArtStation challenge with the Edo period, which I really, really wanted to do, but I just did not have the time because I was moving countries again.
Okay, so yeah, no, that's really stunning materials, and utility you put in them, all the love, and they're actually of course available on the Substance Source right now. If you want to check them, you can go into the signature collection and you have them first, and if you browse down, you have the other collection made by other artists. And today we are going to focus on this one, the Japanese Porcelain, which is here, which we found pretty interesting because it's really subtle and there is a lot of small details on top of that. So could you tell us a bit where you take your inspiration? I'm going to share your screen right now.
Okay. Yeah, let me grab my mood board because I love showing that. So this was kind of the mood board I got together. I ended up tidying it up a bit so it was a bit more presentable. And then I kind of knew that with this pack, I wanted to do various type of materials. So I didn't want to just have environmental, like walls and floors and materials. I kind of wanted to have a nice range with it. So what I did was look at architectural materials and then look at what kind of materials you would expect in the medieval Japan. And then I came across like these type of armors that you can get, which I quite liked and thought would be really nice to do. And then this one's kind of similar, but it was just a different shape and a different type of material. And then here I wanted to again do a kimono type of material as well. So it's silk.
And for people to know, in case they don't know this tool, which tool do you use to make these mood boards?
So with the mood board, I use PureRef, which is just super handy to use. I wish they kind of had a text thing in there, because all these like Tatami maps and Kiko armor here, like I had to basically write it up in Photoshop and then copy paste.
Nice.
So yeah, this is kind of where I got all my material from and got the mood board together, which then I used as the base of what I wanted to do.
Perfect. And so maybe we can focus on the reference for the porcelain one that we have at the bottom left. It's wrong. And you already have shadow, but it's awesome.
Yes, when I was looking for materials for porcelain, I actually found these on Amazon, which I was half tempted to order, which are just balls, porcelain balls, and I was like, oh, that's great.
Yeah, especially for the specular, the roughness, etc. That's a perfect reference.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's have a look at your graph right now. Nice.
So here we are.
So generally, before you start diving into your graph, do you have a way to, when you work, to organize the way you work? Do you start by a specific map, or how do you organize?
Yes, normally I would start off with my height map because that's kind of what I was taught. I was lucky enough at one point to get mentored by Josh Lynch. This was way before he was doing all his other mentoring, and he helped me a lot. And I got to get taught by him. So he taught me like some good methods, which I still do to this day. So I would start off with my height map, which then the AO and the normal ends up getting driven from that. And then after the height, you'd move on to roughness, because that kind of really helps sell the material. And then after that, move on to doing the color at the end. Sometimes I would do for this project, I would do my roughness to the best I can, then do some block out colors and then maybe a bit of detail, and then go back to my roughness and maybe tweak a few things here and there in case I make a new type of dirt, which I'm like, oh, that actually looks really good in the color map. I'll bring that into the roughness as well.
Oh, okay. So before the start, we already have two questions. So the first one is how long does it take to create one material? I guess it depends on the material, but let's say for a material like this one, for example, how long would it take, more or less?
I think this one, originally when I was making it, I only had one pattern. So it only took like maybe a couple of hours, half a day, because I've done a kind of similar material before. But when I started like wanting to, because I had the waves motif as the first one, and then when I started doing the other pattern motifs, they took a little longer to figure out. So altogether, I would say it probably took about a day to do. The more complicated materials, like the stone and all that, took a couple of days, because as well as making the materials themselves, we had to obviously do the exposed parameters. So there was some technical stuff. I had to make sure that when I did the parameters and I did a few sliders, that it didn't completely break anything. And if it did, I needed to go back to a part of the graph and kind of fix that up so it worked perfectly.
Okay, cool. And another question, quick one, from the Invisible Warrior. I think with this name we have no choice but answering. He wants to know if you are going to make even more tutorial on Gumroad. And I think we can say you made a deal today on Gumroad as well, no?
Yes, I did on my Gumroad. I thought to celebrate the stream today and celebrate the 15 materials, I've put a code that you can use on my textures at the moment for 30% off. All you just need to do is in the checkout for the voucher is just put porcelain.
Oh, nice rep.
But I do have some material tutorials, in the works. So there will be something coming out in a few months, depending on when I get around to it. Because obviously I've got a lot on my plate at the moment.
Cool. Okay, so but first, before to go on Gumroad, let's do this material. So I let you start.
Yes. Okay, so this one didn't really have a height map per se, so I could probably leave that till after I've talked about the patterns, and then I will go into the color roughness and surface undulation, which is basically the height and normal. The patterns were a main focus on this material because that is what you're going to see at the end of the day. And then I can come over here. And so we're going to go over, I think the ones we chose to go over is the waves. We're going to leave the fan and fines because some of these methods that are used down here in the other ones are kind of used in that one anyway. And then we're going to talk about the koi and scales, so how I did the fish. And then we're going to go over the Sakura leaves a little bit as well. So I'm going to start off with the wave motifs because that's here at the top. And we can go kind of in order. I might leave the koi and scales a little to last because that one's got a little bit more to it, as you guys can see. And then, so if I select this preset and we're just gonna actually reset this and then click back to the ways. Wait, it was already on ways. Good start, good start. So here I started off with a shape node, and the thing I like about the shape node is that you can tile this as much as you want, so you can bring in more circles or like less, and I just enjoyed having that there. So all I did was create a square, bring the Y size down. 0.16 seemed to do really well on this one, because I didn't want it too thick. I didn't want it too thin where you can't really see the details. And then one of my favorite nodes to use when I want to make something look rounded like this is using the, I can never say this word.
Cartesian to polar.
You good man, you know how to pronounce it.
That's what I'm here.
So I use this one to polar grayscale, which basically changes the UVs from this and that one to more like in the middle. It's a strange mathematical thing, but I remember looking at it one time when I was looking into programming. This node you might have in your graph if you're following along. I'm not sure what happened here. I think this one just kind of ended up in the final graph, which isn't actually doing anything. And then I blend this together, and then having nothing in the background, and then in the opacity here, I then just driv it from this shape over here, which is a 256 simple disk shape, and I didn't really do much except just bring the scale down a little bit on this one, and then from that we can create this here, just to get rid of the edging on here, because obviously you don't want these, because if I push spacebar, it does tile, but that's not what we want. We just want a couple of these waves. So using this removes that.
And just to be clear, you put in 256 the circle for performance reason, right?
Yes, it was all performance reasons. Try to make sure that nothing was above than what it needed to be. And then this here as well, you can see here, this is using L16, then it goes to L8. That to me is fine, because this isn't going to be used in the height. If this was going to be used in the height map, you would want that as still as L16. Otherwise, you get stepping in the height map. So because of this just being a mask, it didn't really matter. Then what I did was invert, and the reason I did that is because I want these white areas and the black discs here, because this black is where the color here, the motif color, is going to come through. And then I turned it into a gradient map, and then from that, and the reason why I do these is so I can merge with this disc hovering over here, and then basically you kind of have this shape going on. So you have some you have an alpha around here. And the reason I do this and keep it as a color is that I've used a tile sampler color rather than just a tile sampler itself, because with the tile sampler, with the black and white, the black gets seen as a alpha anyway, so you would lose that data. So I managed, there's also two nodes here, because you see I managed to get these, and the one thing about having the color one is you can have this nice layering, and it doesn't affect things too much. And if you kind of, because the white sometimes can just mesh together. And then here again, in this alpha, right at the edge, there was a bit of this white, which I wanted to keep in. And the reason was that I wanted these black lines to kind of just end here just before they touch this one, just to kind of show that this is the wave. That it starts there and ends there.
That's why it's important to look at the reference to get these details.
Yes. And then as you can see, the top kind of just cuts off, and then at the bottom here, we got this whole disc here, and then we have this tiling issue. And the way I fixed that was changing. So I kept this as 1020 here in the tiling, and then our scale I'll add to is 2. I didn't really change much, just the offset, just to kind of give it this offset pattern. And then if I come onto this one, this is pretty much the exact same. And then I think I just changed the global offset. So here we have minus 1.5. And then in this one, we have 0.5 and then 1.5. So now the discs end up just here. And then obviously we don't have the full discs here. And then that way, this alpha part will then be a layer. So this one's going to be the top layer. And then this one's going to be the bottom layer. And then using a blend, we'll just copy. We'll manage to get this, which kind of just makes it tile perfectly, which is what we want. And again, the reason why I use tile sampler color and then I use this alpha merge here is because if this didn't have the alpha, obviously you're going to have your problem here. So that's why I kind of did it this way. So I'm going to put that back. And then I know because this is going to be a mask, I need it to be grayscale again. So I've switched that back to just being a grayscale through the grayscale conversion. And then I inverted it so that these white parts were now going to be the motif color. And then it goes into this pattern switch just down here, which is where I have all the patterns coming into. And then we have this custom pattern as well for anyone who wants to put their own black and white image into this. You can do that, and then you just change some parameters which are all set up over here. But yeah, that's pretty much the wave one. I don't know if there's any questions before I move on to the next pattern.
So far so good, but if in the chat room you want to add some question later on, don't hesitate. We are going. Marine is actually monitoring the chat room right now, and she sees everything. So don't hesitate to ask some questions.
The all-seeing eye.
Exactly. So then you have like, this was a really cool one actually, and the other one are quite interesting as well. So let's move on.
Okay. So let's talk about the Sakura leaves motif. So with this one again, I grabbed this disc shape here. The reason why I've put it over here is because I used it a lot in all these patterns. It was my kind of go-to node, rather than just copying and pasting and having loads of the same node, because it just saves on performance. And then over here, to start getting the shape of a Sakura leaf, I used the trapezoid transform grayscale. Hopefully I pronounced that right.
Yes.
Great. And then I used a bottom stretch here, which I just love this node because you can get some really good shapes. Obviously you can get a teardrop shape. You can even start bringing it in from the top as well. Super useful node. And then make sure that goes back. Then I blurred it because these edges were coming off a bit too crisp, and I don't want that. So I just come in here with a blur high quality grayscale. I prefer this one more than the other blur because of the results it comes up with. So it was just more beneficial to use it here just to get this to looking a bit more smooth. And then we have from here, Sakura leaves have like a little part that isn't here. So I just use this part of the node again and then use the transform 2D and then just brought it straight up here. And then I just moved this manually as well, I believe, and then just got it up there. And then because this isn't really an exact number, I just chose the best.
Yeah, and you reuse a lot. Using transform 2D and reusing a shape is way less expensive than reduplicating a node. So it's really good that you are using this transform 2Ds.
Yeah, definitely. And then from there, obviously, we're going to use a blend of a subtract because we don't want that bit there to be there. So we've managed to get this nice cutout area. And then using a slope blur grayscale after that with this cloud 2, just because I like the detail from this, then we can get away this chipping effect. You're probably thinking, why am I doing that for a leaf? And it will make sense, I promise you. And then
We are trusting you.
and then again, I use another slope blur here. This one is more for chipping it a little bit, and then this one is kind of just folding. It feels like a folding type of effect. And then just here, using the purling noise with a scale of 4, and then with that, I then clamp it. And the reason I did this is because I didn't want the leaves to be totally straight. Because obviously if you grab a leaf off a tree or something like that, they're never perfectly rounded. So I wanted to give it that type of wobbly effect. And then I used this splatter circular node, which I really like using. So with this, I just made sure that I had a pattern amount of 5. Because I only wanted 5 of the petals, and then coming down here, making sure that image input is driven from this leaf, and then making sure the radius is too high. And you'll probably notice I left this circle here. We end up taking that away over the node. So I wasn't too fussed that was there, and I quite like the way the radius was, because if it was too in, it kind of looked a bit too podgy. And obviously you don't want the leaves to be too far away from each other. So about 0.22 was a good number here. And then I think sometimes this scale is quite low, so I just brought it all the way up to 1, and then just changed the scale down. And then I didn't really do much else, just make sure that center rotation is on true, because I think it defaults as false, but I could be wrong. It was a while since I made this.
That's a good question. I think it's true, but I'm not sure.
Okay. Then with this, I knew from the reference, I don't have any reference of the actual material here. There was something similar, because this is where I got the kind of leaf basic idea, the waves idea from here. The fines and fans was driven from one of these that I saw, because I quite like the fan idea here and these vines, but I wanted to make it a little bit more straight. And then there is I remember seeing a leaf somewhere here, but maybe I'm just losing my mind.
I saw a real one on the right, but I don't know if it's the one.
We've got the maples there. I think I may have used a website on Google, which I can't remember now because I'm silly and I don't save things sometimes.
Meanwhile, we have
there's a lesson to take from this.
we have a question actually. I guess. Why did you use histogram scan instead of levels node?
With the histogram scan, it was just so that way I can bring the position, or I can kind of clamp this contrast. I didn't want it too clamped because I wanted to keep some of the edges blurred. And then I'll use 0.5. And if I wanted to have it exposable, so people can change if they wanted the rounded one or not, there was that option of being there, where the levels is just kind of a simple clamp. Normally you have to be a bit more finicky, like
exactly.
Clamp it like that. And
if you go into the histogram scan in general, you will see that it's a level node. It's just a simple way to tweak it for this kind of process.
That's always good to know. So I had my splat circular. I wanted to get rid of the middle so it looked like this. And again, I used the same disc that was just over here and reused that. Used the transformer node and brought it really down as far as I can. And then I made sure to put no tiling on because it defaults its HV. And then obviously I don't want all this extra data. So I put no tiling on and then it blurs it here. So I used, again, the histogram scan to clamp it that we had this type of result going on here. And the reason it blurs is because it's coming from a 256 to the 2048, so it's blurring a little bit. But if I got rid of that like position and then had it quite low, I needed to make sure you couldn't see this bit, and I just wanted it to be more round, which was a better result like that. And then I created this type of shape coming out from it, which I found on one of my references. They kind of just had these two like ones in one petal. So I was like, I kind of wanted to have that type of pattern as well, just to sell it a little bit, so it wasn't totally too boring to look at, I would say. Because if I come over here, go Sakura and I click apply, and then I actually just got rid of this bit, it to me just didn't look as good, especially with just a circle there. So I just felt like that gave it that extra bit of detail. And then how I did this was, I again reused a square from up here. So I had this shape that I made really, really thin for the vines, the fan, sorry, this little bottom bit here. And I thought I could reuse that. So I brought it down here, just made it smaller. And again, making sure that no tiling's on, so we are getting extra data. And then with this circle, I just moved it up, and then we had this like lollipop effect going on. You can see this one had sharp edges, this one was a bit blurry. So again, I used the histogram scan to clamp it, and then using the splatter circular, I think I copied and pasted from this one, but I knew there was going to be, because we had 5 here, and then I knew there was going to be 2 in there. It was just a matter of changing that to 10 and bringing the radius down a bit more. And then I think I just took the scale and the scale random, just so that they weren't all at the same level. It kind of had that different type of heights going on here, which I just thought looked really nice. And then in here we used the blend of subtract again, and then we come back here to making this a color map, and then using the gradient from, so I'm blending here together this one here, and then obviously we don't want this middle bit to be there. So instead of subtract, I put add, so we filled in this gap, and then blurred it, and then clamped it, so that we had some black on the outline. And there's a reason I did that, is because if I did it here, we can then have this happening with the overlapping, which I will show over here. We have now this black line. If I bring this down and just have it as the white, it does, like, it just kind of meshes together and blends together, and it doesn't look that great. So that kind of helps separate all these different elements together, and then the overlaying, overlapping just looked a lot cleaner.
That's cool. In case you haven't been using Substance Designer for a while, I mean like more than 1 year, we remade completely the splatter circular like a bit more than a year ago. So I invite you guys to take a look at it, because we added a lot of cool options within it.
Yeah, because I think I remember using it a few years back and there wasn't as much in there. And now I had a guy who I worked with in Ubisoft, Annecy, and this was like his go-to node, because now you can like change the radius to like super far and then the spread. So it is I guess it would be a cheaper way of scattering data if you need to as well. Because the tile samplers are quite expensive because of all these other nodes going on.
Yeah, it can work. Tile sampler or tile generator, for example, but why not the splatter circular? You can be crazy with it.
So the reason I use these tile samplers color rather than the tile generator was just because of the type of effect that I needed on these. I probably could have got away with the tile generator color, but I think I may have used something in here that was really specific. but my mind goes foggy when I try and remember. So again, with these black lines, as I mentioned here, it kind of helps separate it, and it just looks a little bit more neater, and then we didn't have to worry about any other stuff going on over here. And then changing this back to grayscale, so we have our conversion here, and then obviously we want the alpha to come out of that. So we're kind of merging it together and then splitting it back up, which I think the shape splatter kind of has a similar thing. When you get the shape splatter data, is you can get this kind of data going on. So that was my way of trying to recreate it with just a tile sampler node. And then down here, because we're going to bring in these extra bits here, and you'll see why I split this alpha again, is with these leaves. You going to say something? I heard some breathing.
No, I like breathing. I'm going to ask you something after, but
okay.
just finish this.
All right. So I grabbed hold of my petal from over here, the clamped one, and brought it over here. And then using a directional warp, you kind of have this leaf which kind of looks like it's just falling, and you just caught it at an angle in a picture. So I really wanted that, and then I could then use that as a shape, as well as this one for this first pattern input. Then bringing those together, you kind of have these ones that are falling, and these ones will kind of look like they've got windswept. And I just felt like they looked really, really nice. And then because if we didn't have this and I come over here, when we bring it in these leaves here and we were to overlay, we'd start getting it on top of these leaves. So using this alpha split data, I was able to blend it, subtract. So the good thing again with this and the histogram scan is then it was this like little bloated bit. So we have this area, so it's not going to be really close when we take away. So we have these bits here. And if we bring it in, you can see now it's like not totally, because if I was going to bring that down, we could have it like that. But again, like I said, it separates the elements together and it kind of just looks like it's happening underneath these elements. And then, yeah, just using that blend here to max lighten, which is just brings all the white data to the same level. And then, yeah, we pretty much put that into the pattern input. And then that's how I did the Sakura leaves motif.
That's super nice. So I have two questions for you, actually three in total. I have Marco Silva, who is asking a good one. Is reusing the circle from an existing node is more performant than just creating? So the answer is yes. If you reuse, I think this one is easy. And this one, the second one, is more conceptual. You will love it. Is why try to recreate the shape splatter and not just use?
So the shape splatter is super expensive because of the data it drives from. Just like if I bring it in here, shape splatter, you can see here it's just straight away red, where this one is green. And I obviously with the limitations, you had to, because you guys, the Substance guys, gave me the like limitations, and you have to make sure that it can run on certain hardware. So the best way to do that is make sure you use the cheaper ways of doing it, because if I don't really need these nodes, and if I did like a tile sampler like cut version, I could probably get rid of some of these and again make it a bit more cheaper. But using the shape splatter node itself, you have all this data, and because it grabs the data from these, it's just super expensive.
Yeah, it's a really powerful node, but maybe overkill for for this case.
And the only reason why it's gone green now is because nothing's plugged in.
So nothing is processed, almost nothing. Another question, it leads me to another question, which is, as you said, when working with Substance Source team, we have some constraints that are different from a regular production. So how did it change the way you work in this project?
Normally, I don't really work with a lot of constraints. Some of my previous work that I've created, even my portfolio materials that I create, because I'm only ever thinking about what the final result's going to look like, because I would then export out the PNGs. Now, we use this kind of method on Tom Clancy's Division too. It was just the Substance plugin that we used then brought in the PNGs of that, or is that maybe the Targas, I forget what it was used in. And then so because it was only focused on what the image looked like, performance wasn't a problem. We didn't ever have to think about, okay, what can we cut, what can we make cheaper. We could just go all out. I remember one graph on the Division 2, when it was opened, it could take like 5 to 8 minutes to load up because it was just so heavy, because it had a lot of detail in the material, because it was I believe one of the train ones. So obviously there was going to be different elements like the actual ground, rocks, leaves, twigs and whatnot. So the graph was super big. And so it's only more recently I'm starting to get clients that want to have the ability to change stuff on the fly, or just a substance that they can change. Again, with Painter, if you're going to put in some changes and you want to have that material in Substance Painter for other artists to use, you kind of need to make it quite quick to use. Otherwise, it's frustrating saying a character artist is painting something and they're like, okay, I want to change something on this node, and it takes too long. It's just really frustrating. So I've started now being more self-conscious of limitations. I've even tried using the tile sampler less, because tile sampler is like one of my favorite nodes to use. I use it all the time, but because tile generator is way cheaper and kind of does the same interpretation as the tile sampler, just there might be some that aren't in there. So yeah, I'm just trying to use the tile generator more, which I did end up using a lot more in my other materials that I did for the source pack.
Yeah, thanks for the explanation. It's true that the Substance Source team is always first has to make super high quality material visually, but as we don't know where the material will be used, it can be used in Substance Designer, Substance Painter, Substance Alchemist. So we are making sure that they perform really well as well. So this is a key point, definitely.
Yeah, and I guess some studios, like game studios, might have these powerful computers, but for an architectural visualization company, they might not have as high-end PCs, so their computers are going to probably be a bit slower than running the Substance changes. So it's good to make it accessible, especially for source, because any type of company can end up using it.
Definitely.
And yeah, it just makes it easier. So even if someone could probably run it on a potato if they liked.
Exactly. Last question, maybe from, I won't say the name because I think it's a Greek name. Moscow Bess or something like that. Sorry, I start. So, is there a way to remove the artifact on the leaves? They are beneath the flower with a pixel threshold. Not sure which ones exactly.
What was that? Sorry, you kind of broke.
So the artifacts and the leaves, they are beneath the flower with a pixel threshold. I'm not sure which one we are talking about, honestly.
I don't know if he means. I don't know if he means this, or is he talking about like this type of thing, like the reason I did the alpha subtract and then maximum, because
that we may have the answer in 30 seconds as we have a delay. I guess, or maybe the small pixel that we have, they are here by purpose. Or it may be as well the zooming effect in the 2D view, because there is no anti-aliasing, as it's not 100% right now. Maybe that it's just there may not be anything except the leaves that were erased with the mask from the flower. That's what I won't say the name because it's written in Greek.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm not entirely sure how to answer that one.
Sorry about that.
I don't really fully understand it. Yeah, sorry about that.
Don't hesitate. If you want, after write me an email and I'll share with Kyle. See if you can make a screenshot of what you are talking about, and we'll find the answer.
Yes, we will help. Okay, so is that it for the questions, or you got any more?
Yeah, you can go ahead.
Great. Let's move on to the and I will show you how to make a fish in Substance. So over here, I used a gradient linear, and then we bring this down to over here and I make sure it's changed to absolute so I can change it, and then we bring this down to 32 because this doesn't have to be a full width, because we're only going to be using the up and down gradient. So you can bring this down as much as possible. I think I used 32 because when it comes down to 16, it kind of did maybe something funky in some other materials. And then again, we can use the grayscale, which again, I've used this beloved disk node just up here. So I should have probably commented this one and gave it a little love heart. And then with that, we're using a multiply. And this one is for the scales right now. We'll talk about the fish in a second. So we're going to bring this for the scales because using then the tile generator, we can have this up and down data. So the top bit's obviously going to be on the top, and then it goes back to the black, which is then going to be hidden under this next row of scales, and then and then on and on and on. Here I just used a 10 by 20, and I brought the instance over a bit just to, because obviously using a 20 here, it's kind of squished them down. So this instance over here, we can kind of bring them in and make them a little bit more thinner. And then again, we use the offset so that it wasn't perfectly linear. You see, if we bring this up, we can kind of have this type of thing going on. So 0.5 was the brilliant one. That way it's like scale here, scale there, scale here, there, scale there. Then I used a slight luminance random, just a little bit. I think the reason I did that was to kind of help the edge detect work, because sometimes if the colors are too close together, the white edging won't sometimes happen. So I got this edge detect, which I brought the edge thickness up to 3. So I had this bit, and then I believe, I used this one for the fish here. And then for the fish, again, use the beloved disk node up here. Squished it in using the transform, again, making sure no tiling is, because obviously we don't want this extra data. And then using the trapezoid, I said that completely wrong. I'm not even going to try.
I'm letting you struggling a bit. Trapezoid.
That's the one.
Yeah.
I struggle with many words. So we have this transform grain scale, which I wanted to have because the way the body of the fish is, this was great to get like a semi like type of tear drop looking effect, and then just blurring it here because this here was maybe a bit too sharp and I wanted it to be more rounded. So the perfect way of doing that is bringing a blur. I use again blur high quality grayscale because I prefer this one, and then bringing up the intensity and then using the histogram scan to clamp this detail. And then obviously we go from this sharp here to a more smooth. So if I zoom out, so you got sharp and then smooth. So we're going from 256 to 1024 over here. And I think the reason I did that was because if I change that to relative to the input, I think it was maybe for one of these other nodes that I needed it to be higher on. So yeah, that was a good way of doing it. And then obviously I could bring this up and down if I just only have a little bit of a bend here for the tail. But I went full out on this. And then again, if I change this blur, it kind of just helps as well. We can have a really fat podgy fish if we wanted to. And then again, using the edge detect. Here we have the body here, and then this edge detect, and I believe here I'm subtracting this edge bit. The reason I'm doing that is some detailing for the body, which I will show in a sec. So with this edge detect, I'm going to bring in the scales into the body area, and then here I knew, because if I didn't have this going on, this is all over the body. I didn't want that, so the best way of clamping it, because this is kind of where the fish's faces are going to be, I'm going to change this over here to the coin scale so you can see what's going on here. So this is the end result, what we want. So here is again where the face is for the koi. So what I did was grab this shape disc here, just bring it up in the scale a bit so the edges were more closer to the edge, and then using another transform, and I because if I started moving this one around, I didn't want this to happen here. On here I can then change to horizontal tiling rather than just having it all the four here. I'm going to change to horizontal and then just bring this up, which I did is a 2.5 so it hits the edge. And then I think originally I did this 0.5, but I needed to bring the head down a little bit more. So I manually, holding shift down, brought this down in the body here. Because, yeah, holding shift is great because it just keeps it from snapping over. Unless you go too far, then it goes into a diagonal type of pan. Again, blur that. Get this shape, and then have this here, which kind of looks very. And then using this here to take away that bit, so I had the face masked off. So then that I can now then use this mask for body detailing, which I did for the koi scales here. And then with this shape, I knew that the fish kind of needed to have this line here because this kind of just ends in parts, and this wouldn't have looked very good as it is. So I knew I needed to do a, and then using the shape of the body, because obviously we don't want this to go all the way off. But I did like this shape. I was like, oh, that's great. I could like have the koi whiskers coming out like that. So I did end up reusing this shape again to kind of give it a mustache. And then once we had this, I brought it down in a scale again, just using the transform 2D with, because you don't want this. And then up here, as I said, I've used the same edge detect. I duplicated it because I wanted this one to be a little bit thicker, because when it was too thin, you really don't get to see it in this. So making it a bit thicker just kind of helped make it more visible in the image itself. And then using a transform, I can move that to where I need it to be. Blurred it, so we had the blur on this edge, and then we clamp it that way. We have it nice and rounded, and we kind of have our fish whiskers coming together. And then again, I moved it like this because originally I did have it like this, and I moved it up. It just didn't look as good when it was sticking out too far. So I used a transform 2D to manually move this where I needed to be, so we had the whiskers coming off more at this type of angle. And then again, I just used a histogram scan here to clamp it, because sometimes the transform 2D can kind of, when you there's the image a bit more, you can change that with the filtering and I think maybe the MIP map, but I thought it was just easier just to kind of clamp those details and then bring that together, and then we have a whisker over here. And there's kind of a reason why I've only have it on one side and I didn't end up adding it to the other side, is because much like when you're modeling a 3D character, you kind of just want to focus on one side because you use the symmetry tool to have it look complete on both sides. So to save myself time from then duplicating this and just make it a flip node, I knew I was going to add more details like the eyes and stuff. So I was like, okay, I'm going to use the symmetry tool at the end. So over here we have our mask of these two, and then bringing it down in transformation. And the reason, see where I put that a little bit later. So maybe I will talk about the eye, which is quite simple to make. It's just grabbing that disc from earlier. I washed it down ever so slightly, and how to do that, because obviously you don't want it to do this. Holding Control and Shift, you're able just to kind of change one of the sides. I think if you did, it works with just Control. I mean, Control Shift was just kind of a habit that I do. Then I duplicate it by bringing this transform and then bringing it down and making it a lot bigger. So that way we can use this blend of subtract to kind of get this shape here. And then if you want your fish to blink, you can kind of move up and down. We can give them a big eyes. But obviously we don't want that.
It looks angry right now.
Yeah, it looks angry, and it goes from a shocked face or very cute looking. Or like very suspicious type of eyes. It's a very suspicious fish. This one.
Yeah, like a sneaky fish.
So yeah, just using the blend here and then grabbing this transform, because obviously we don't want the eye right in the middle of the body. We want it where the eye is going to be. Together, just using the max lighten, and then just using a transform to bring this up, because then I knew I wanted to do my tail, and I couldn't do that because I need so that the tail as well as the body would fit. Now, how I did the tail is a different story. So here I am taking this gradient linear 3, which is an Vines motif, and I think I saved this as a 1-2-8 because when I brought it too low, it kind of didn't work with this shape here. I'll show you it kind of curved it a little bit too much. So I felt 1-2-8 was good. And it didn't really affect this too much because I just wanted to use a safe transform grayscale and just tile it 19 times, sorry. Just so I had loads. And the reason I do that, and I use this warp node because I wanted this to have several lines. I think originally I did try and have a lot more, but it didn't look, you couldn't really read it in here. You can kind of see it kind of just blurs a little bit too much. So I kept it as simple as possible. So you just nice line here, and then you can kind of just see the edge here, which kind of makes the fin look like it just thickens in that little bit here. And then here I use the waveform, which is good to get this like teardrop, double teardrop, or like a leaf type shape. And then I use transform node just so that I could rotate it, because you can't do that in the actual waveform. So once that was rotated, I blurred it a lot and then put that into the warp, because obviously if it was perfectly straight, it's not going to do anything. It uses the gradient to warp it. And then again, using the histogram scan, so I could grab how thick I wanted these lines. So I got it about there. Then using the mask of this waveform, sorry, my mouse was playing up a bit there. So yeah, using that as a mask here just to kind of take it away. And then I use that again as an edge mask. It wasn't, again, like how I did the scales over there. We didn't just have just hovering around like that. I wanted a nice outline, a curved outline around this. So using the edge detector, I was able to get that. Again, I just chose quite a thick one just because it reads better being thicker than thinner. And I believe this was a lot of testing. I think originally all my lines were quite thin, but I had to make everything a bit thicker so it just reads a lot better.
There are some people who are saying that the fins looks upside down. So
the fin?
Yeah, which they may be the other way one. I think it's something you can choose on a. It's true that they look like they.
Yeah, I think I looked at a couple of fins and koi ideas when I was actually doing this, and I chose just a really simple one because some of the designs I've seen for kois were super detailed and they looked really, really good. Originally, I was going to actually grab my iPad, get Procreate out, and draw a koi fish as detailed as I could, but I really wanted to make this purely in Substance Designer, so that way everyone can benefit from just learning how to make certain shapes inside of Sub Designer. So the fin and such, I kind of had to just make up a little bit.
Yeah, they look cool anyhow.
Thank you. And I think the reason I used because the back fin area normally is a lot more longer and luscious looking, but because I don't want to spend too much time trying to do that because I had all the other materials to do, I kind of just copied the same fin, just to kind of help with the modularity and keeping it simple. And then, so yeah, that's basically why I did that.
Okay.
So with our blend here, I'm going to bring the transform to be smaller. I had to bring it down here because obviously we don't want one big one here, and then I moved it to about here so that it blended together like this. And then once those two were together, again, as you see here, back fin for the side. And I just moved it so we had this little hand fin here. And again, I didn't bother making it on the other side. And the reason I did that is because then I use this mirror grayscale, which basically just kind of finishes off the other side, and it saves a lot more work for doing it. And then just, sorry, mirror axis X, and then just leaving, I think this is all on the default settings, so I didn't really change much here. And then I knew I kind of wanted two fish kind of looking at each other, and the best way to do that was using this shape splatter node, the shape mapper node. And then
this is a new one as well, which 1 year old. Or
otherwise it looked like this. It didn't look. So yeah, I rotated it like this, and then make sure this is on circle, because obviously if you add the polygons, you're going to have these really weird edges, which didn't look very good. With circle, it kind of looks like that they're swimming around each other, which really I just wanted to. If I start adding more, I could add more, but then the fish just get a little bit fatter. And then with just one, it just looked completely wacky. So yeah, having two was the perfect amount. And then using this blend over here, and you're probably wondering why I've done this and where the other fish has gone, because there's nothing going into background or opacity. And what I used is, so I've left everything as copy, and then I use this cropping area. So I basically cropped out this other fish. And then why I did that, the reason why I've done these is because it looks now like, rather than the fish just being straight narrow, it looks like it's swimming, but I only just wanted the one. So yeah, using this blend, I kind of cropped out one using transform 2D, scaled it up, make sure it filled out the whole image, and then I could use two tile generators. So I had it doing this, and then that way I could choose where these guys kind of met. Where if I had kept to this and then shoved them into the tile generator, or I probably would have just needed one. It just wouldn't have worked. With this, I can kind of choose the actual offset of where the fish are to one another, so they could be either next to each other's faces, or they can be like how this shape's mapper would be. I'd probably want to bring them out a little bit more if I wanted to. That's how the shape mapper would have been. So yeah.
We have a question actually. Juho is asking what's the difference between safe transform and transform.
So transform 2D here, I can change the shape, move it wherever I want, which helps. Where safe transform I can create a bunch of tiling, and it would also just keep, like, I can't drag where I want this to be. And this is great for if you want to, say you had some lines or something, then you wanted it to maybe be rotated. You now see it's tiling in these edges perfectly, and then I can just bring on more. So this one is safe because it keeps the edges tiling.
Yeah,
where
you cannot break the tiling with this one.
Yeah, you can just break the tiling, even though HMV tiling is turned on. I'm breaking the tiling here. Where this one is, I can kind of just move this manually. And if I show you the red mark where the tiling happens, they will always tile. So it's a safer way of doing it, so you don't break your tiling. So yeah, that's why I did that. That's really bad. So hopefully that made sense of why I used that. The difference between those. And again, I needed to create a mask for these because I needed to mask out the shapes from over here. So I grabbed this safe transform because I think over here, the original one, they were a bit bigger. So I just brought it so they tiled twice for the background. Use the edge detect. So we had this type of shape instead. Obviously, I can bring this to more or less. It's quite nice actually like that. But then you kind of lose, I think, a bit of the information with the fish. And then over here, all this is basically doing what this did. Just creating the mask for it, much like how we did the so yeah, it's just copying the exact same method I did. I think I just copied and pasted this and just used it driven from the mask. So I had this alpha here, and then I had the actual fish. Just so that we had this nice blur edge in, and then that way I could clamp it and then have this data again. So like with the, like, so if I show this as it is, yeah, these kind of just end up connecting to each other. So I kind of created the same type of method that I did with the Sakura leaves, so that they're not hitting each other. It just didn't work as well with the mustache because of the sizing of it, and it was just a matter of blending blending them together. to create this type of shape. Yeah, so that's why I did that. And then again, we go into this pattern switch, and then yeah, so that's how I did the coin scale motif. I don't know if there's any other questions before I move on to the last bit.
So far, so good, I guess. Sorry about the sound. There is some encoding system, so there may be some. I don't. It's Skype. I think it's the encoder that is overloaded. But hopefully, it's good in general. I'm just checking the chat at the same time if there is some new question. So far, no. So yeah, don't hesitate to ask them if you are specific about the fish. Something some other question. I think we have made we have seen
Okay.
all the ones we wanted to see, or yes?
Yeah, so we've seen the patterns that I was going to go over. So what I'll do now is talk about the more height, the roughness, and the color map itself. And I'll start off with the height itself because it's so simple for this node, because obviously I didn't want it to be really bumpy because porcelain is smooth, but if you put your hand over porcelain, it does feel like it's not perfectly smooth. You feel like a slight bumpiness to it. So I kind of wanted to copy that. So I used this blue noise fast, which is just this. Make sure spacebar. Are very lots of like pixels of black and white, different colors, and then I used this reaction diffusion to kind of, using this, it kind of generates this weird randomness to it. And then the thing I like about this node is create with it, but obviously I didn't want that type of shape, so I kept this as low as possible as I could, as 0.1, and I created this, blend them together, create this weird like diffusion going on here, and then I blurred it. So this was kind of a way of making my own purling noise, like a map, but because I blended these together, it kind of kept the white data to a minimal, so it wasn't perfectly white and black. And that way, when I blurred it, you can kind of see this bumpiness going on, but it's not like how the purling noise is, where it's just like that. So yeah, I blurred it, and I just brought the range down again because I don't want the height map. I didn't want it to be totally bumpy, like, because that is not what you see in porcelain. It looks nasty, so I changed it. So it was smooth, but not totally smooth, and it's very subtle details affect the way the light kind of just goes over it, like a bit of light here just kind of bouncing. So yeah, it was, just made it so that it wasn't perfectly smooth. If I come into the normal, you guys are probably not going to see it in the stream. If I really zoom in, you can kind of see a little bit of different up and down data, but it's so very subtle. And that's one thing to kind of always keep in mind, is subtleness with materials. A lot of people exaggerate shapes. I do that as well sometimes. But having a lot of subtle details overlaid with each other kind of helps to bring the material to a more realistic look. So yeah, that's what I did for the height and normal. So and then that way I could just change like the relief balance and stuff. And then this is all like the technical stuff, which is this type of detailed technical parameters, which is what came in the template that the Substance gives you. So with the roughness, I had a very simple uniform color, 32 by 32. You want to keep it really small because I knew this was just going to be one color. I didn't need it to be 2K because it's just going to be a big, like one single color node. To try and bring it down as small as possible. It just helps with the performance as well. So I grabbed the cells here. They're a very low opacity, and this also kind of helps with the roughness. Just break this up a bit, just so that when this light is going over, sometimes it just gives it that bumpiness, and then it just distorts this so slightly, and it just kind of helps with the realism. Why? Because if this was totally flat, that would be totally circular all the way through when it's moving through the material. And I kind of just wanted to give it a little bit of bumpiness feel to it. And again, here...
No, there's generally this kind of detail or small details that we see on the live streams with artists like you that really brings a lot to the believability of the materials.
Yeah, it definitely helps a lot. So... yeah, so over here we're actually getting the data from the pattern switch, which goes into some of the color stuff, and then this is basically used as the roughness for the motif, which is I come into our parameters over here, of that up. So the motif, maybe you want it to be more rough then smooth, and then you can bring that down. So if you bring this all the way down to 0, it gets rid of the other one, and then you basically use in one single roughness, where then you bring this back in. The motif is separate, and then you can just bring that down. You could even make the outside rough. If it's really gloss, but then to me that doesn't look like porcelain now. It just kind of looks like a rubber ball with shiny details on it,
which is great as well. That's not the point, but it's great.
So yeah, you could do a couple of things. You can make it look like a nice shiny porcelain ball, or you can change it to not be like that. So the color map again is a very simple color map. Over here I'm doing a lot of subtle details again. So we got this here, and the reason I choose for is if it goes down, I think I could have done 16, but when you go a bit too low, it kind of just breaks it. I'm not sure what the technical term is, it just kind of does.
I have a question from Simon Tartar, who is a great substance artist as well. So the question is, just curious, what is the lowest value that you have on the roughness? I have sometimes issue very low rough value.
Okay, so I think for me, I kept it not too low, because if you normally have it too low, it just doesn't, like, you just don't get this type of highlighting. I think it just depends. A lot of I don't know if there's really a certain amount that you need to adhere to, but I know that I've seen some PBR charts where it's kind of like you want to hit a certain threshold. So maybe that's one thing you kind of might want to look into. Maybe the threshold is just too low on the engine that you're using, or if you're using Marmoset, because it kind of varies on different software.
Cool, thanks. And he added that he loves the material, so this is cool.
Right, so here we're using some subtle details. I'm using this dirt here because I like the data that comes from this, and then here using the clouds, then using the dirt in a grayscale, and then using this clouds 2 as a slope. We break it up to make it more grainy looking, and again using the slope blur. And then if I zoom in now, we go from this really noisy grain to this nice like type of shape going on, and I thought this was quite nice. Like in some parts it actually looks like flowers or petals, so I really just liked that shape, and and then I blended them two together because I kind of wanted this grainy noise. And then using this multi-directional warp, which is one of my favorite nodes to use as well. I use it quite a lot in my other materials. Kind of just blurring these details a bit using the white data from over here, and then putting that in the opacity. Now I use the multiply, and I have it at 0.25. And again, you guys might not be able to see it on the stream, but if I move it around a little bit, you can kind of see darker splotches and then some lighter splotches. If I shove this up a bit more, you're going to see it a bit more. You see this data happening.
Yeah, it's extremely subtle. We see here. Here we can see.
Yeah,
that's once again, that's the kind of details that are almost invisible, but that brings a lot in the end result.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it definitely does. So having that subtleness, it may not feel like or look like it does much, but the end result, it kind of just has that look that when you look at it, it looks real. Where if you didn't have this type of subtle detailing, it might just look they're like your brain will kind of think, oh, there's something not totally right about this. But I think it kind of definitely helps having these weird subtle details, even if they're super, super low. And then again, I just had the same thing going on with this fractal sum base. I've changed the mid level up to 11 and then changed the max level to 11. I didn't change any of the rough. That again, very, very subtle overlay. And then here I have the base. So from this pattern switch, which is now where I'm going to be driven most of my information from now. So when you see the lines going up, that's where it's going. Here I'm using break these up because in the porcelain, and I'll show you in my reference, sometimes you have this type of thing, like the paint or what it is kind of seeped out, or kind of just like over here, it kind of just comes out a bit, and I really wanted to capture that type of look. So using that with this grayscale kind of like punches these out a little bit, and then that way I can bring this base color here and bring that to these blurry parts. And the reason I use this Perlin noise, clamping it with the level node here, and then overlay that way, this isn't like perfectly uniform over. We just want the line of this coming out a little bit. So here now you can see the very faint like blue coming over. Same here. Because again, if I bring that, it's just going to be kind of uniform around.
That's awesome.
Yes, so it just kind of helps break it up. Yeah. Then again here, I did this type of similar thing. I clamped this, gave it a bit more, just so that we had this a blur to kind of help with the layering of this shape. So we go from here, and then we're kind of bringing this back in, and then we have, because of this, we can then now have these darker points, and then it goes into these nice lighter spots, which bring the realism of the material when it's all put together. Because I knew I was going to make this color darker, because in the when you're looking at some of these lines, it does go from dark to light. So I wanted to copy that type of detailing. So that's how I implemented that, was doing these type of blurs and having that happen. So now you can see a darker spot here and then a lighter spot.
Okay.
And then,
No, go ahead.
Okay, so over here, I grabbed then this pattern input, and then, no, that's coming from over here. So over here again, I use this blend here, and then using the Perlin noise again, I just moved this ever so slightly, just so that this was different from this one with the multiply. So that way it was taken away from a different area in the actual color. And then again here, I'll bring it in a little bit more, just keeping, this kind of just helps accent a different part. So where we had this kind of just blurs it around. This kind of helps again bring in more the light to dark areas. And just because I moved that purling noise, it kind of brings it into different parts. Then I use the uniform color, brought the saturation up, and then in here we kind of overlay that together, and there you go, you can kind of see some blur edging around this. You can see this like pink bit coming out and stuff like that. And then I just blurred it ever so slightly because this used to be a bit too harsh on these. This kind of just helped get rid of that. And then this high pass is then used, bringing this in, is actually used for image. So rather than just using sharpen here, this kind of is a bit too aggressive sometimes. Obviously you can make it even worse. But you can bring it more subtle, but I find like and getting an ab sub, I can then change this over here, and then I can kind of sharpen the color map. You can see when I'm doing this, you see it in here as well, especially those edges a bit. If I bring it out, you can just very subtly see them sharpening. So that's basically why I use that high pass. I use that quite a bit on most of my materials. See, most of my portfolio materials as well kind of has a high pass going on at the end, just to help it look a bit more real. And again, it's just about having it really subtle, so it's not too aggressive. But yeah, that's basically that material in a nutshell.
That's awesome. Once again, sorry for the cuts. It's I don't know if it's Skype or OBS, which are like taking all the overloaded. But yeah, we cannot do a lot. We're going to watch this to make it better on next time. A question from Juho once again. Can you give an example of multi-directional warp versus the other warp? So while you prepare it, I can tell you how it is done internally. Basically, the multi-directional warp is inspired by Daniel Tiger and Jonathan Bainano's technique, which consists in taking multiple directional warp in the four, I think, the 2 or 4 directions.
Yeah,
so
1, 2, or 4.
Exactly. So this way you can warp the shape, but still containing it. It's less aggressive than a warp node, and still it contains the shape in the center. Warps, which take 2 inputs to deform your shape, which is one for the intensity and the other one for So we are going to look at the chat to see if there is so good. Once again, sorry for the small cuts.
There's quite a few cuts then, for me at least. I don't know if the stream heard it, but yeah, I think Skype kind of cut out a few bits then.
Yeah. So did we do everything? I think we have the color.
Yes. Yeah, that's we've just done the color. So yeah, that's basically it now for that material overview.
Question? Yeah, bon. À partir de
Okay.
So I didn't hear, sorry, Kaz, do you want to do the color or?
We've just gone through the colors, sorry.
Okay, yeah, sorry, that's perfect. So thank you, everyone. Sorry once again for the cuts. It's really something. I think it is the first one of the year, so we are going to do better next time. Once again, thank you, Kyle, for all the information. Don't forget that you can go on Substance Source and download the material for free. So enjoy it. Look at the SBS, so you get all the information. So if you need some more information, I'm gonna transfer them to Kyle, and you will get. Thank you, and see you next time for another live stream.